My name is Soraya. I was born into one of the most powerful royal families in the Middle East. Wealth, servants, private jets, political protection, everything was handed to me. Except freedom. Except truth. From the outside, I lived a dream. But on the inside, I was dying. And one night, when my sister was drowning in a flood across the world, I did something forbidden. I whispered a name I was taught never to speak. Jesus. What happened next tore through every lie I'd ever believed. This isn't just a story of survival, it's about a spiritual war, one most people don't even realize they're part of. It's about a battle between deception and awakening, between religion and relationship, between the kingdom of man and the kingdom of God. And yes, this is about the hidden agenda I discovered behind power, politics, and faith itself. A truth so dangerous, so liberating, it nearly cost me everything. I saw things in dreams that no news station will ever report. I watched how the elite manipulate our systems, from media to religion to crisis. And I saw the man who walks through floodwaters, fire, and fear, reaching for hearts they've tried to keep silent. He came for my sister, and then he came for me. So stay with me, because what I'm about to share isn't fiction, it's a testimony. And if you've ever felt like something is off in the world, like there's more than what they're telling us, this message is for you. Before we begin, comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? I want to know how far this truth is reaching. And if this speaks to you, even a little, subscribe now to Truth from Beyond. Not for me, but because what's coming next could change everything, and I don't want you to miss it. I wasn't supposed to question anything, ever. My name is Soraya Al-Rashid, born into the iron-gated world of Saudi royalty, where gold sparkles on the outside, but silence rules the soul. I was raised under the relentless watch of bodyguards, advisors, religious mentors, and political whisperers. The palace was pristine, but I always sensed something was rotting beneath the surface. From the moment I could walk, I was trained to obey, never explore, never doubt, and especially never ask about truth that didn't come from the appointed clerics or the ruling elite. But inside, I was starving, not for food or wealth. I had more than enough of that, but for meaning, for something real. I used to think my discomfort was just immaturity, that maybe I was too sensitive, too weak to handle the honor of being born where I was. But as I grew, I realized it wasn't weakness. It was a warning, an alarm inside me, ringing louder each year. There were rules about how a woman like me should speak, dress, walk, believe, even breathe. Everything in our world was about control. And the religion we practiced? It wasn't a relationship. It was ritualized fear. I saw it in my mother's eyes, in my tutor's eyes, in my own. I felt like a bird in a diamond cage, technically free to move, but only within walls set by others. I kept these thoughts buried beneath layers of makeup, rehearsed smiles, royal dinners, and endless surveillance. Sometimes I'd sneak glances at foreign media, carefully filtered through secret VPNs. I'd watch stories from the West, stories of Christians, people talking about awakening, about truth, about Jesus. Though in our language, he was Isa, and he was never spoken of as savior, just a prophet. Yet somehow, the way they spoke of him, it stirred something in me. I didn't understand it at the time, I just knew it was dangerous. And that danger felt oddly alive. Still, I tried to be the perfect daughter. I memorized my prayers, studied Islamic law, and said all the right things. But every time I bowed to the rituals, I felt further away from something I couldn't name. At night, I'd look out from the palace windows and wonder why I felt so hollow in a place so full of power. Was it just me? Or was this the deception they warned us never to question? The feeling grew stronger, especially when I overheard conversations between royal men, plans, agendas, alliances that didn't feel holy at all. They talked of world leaders, of manipulating narratives, of shaping a future that served the few while the many stayed blind. A hidden agenda, masked as stability. And I was a pawn in it. It was during one of those late-night moments, when the silence of the palace was thick enough to choke on, that I whispered a question I had never dared to speak aloud. Is this all there is? That question, as simple as it was, marked the beginning of my unraveling. I didn't know it then, but a spiritual war was about to break out inside me, and the next phone call I received from my sister Miriam halfway across the world would crack everything open, a crisis that would become my awakening. But I'll tell you about that in a moment. I still remember the moment the call came in. It was past midnight in Riyadh, and I was alone in my private quarters, staring blankly at a Quran on the table, wondering why the words felt so distant lately. When I picked up, I could barely hear Miriam's voice over the chaos in the background. She was crying, gasping, screaming my name. Her house in Texas was flooding, not just water on the floor, raging, violent water rising faster than she could think. She was with her 2 daughters, trapped on the 2nd floor. And then the line cut. I froze. My hands trembled, but my training kicked in. I prayed. I dropped to my knees on the polished marble and began reciting the most powerful verses I had memorized since childhood. I begged Allah for protection over my sister. I cried until my throat hurt. But deep down, a terrifying silence echoed back. It felt like shouting into a void. The polished rituals, the endless recitations, they suddenly felt empty. And in that quiet, something strange happened. A face flashed in my memory, my old nanny, Layla. She was a Coptic Christian from Egypt, and she loved me like a daughter. I hadn't thought of her in years, but in that moment, I remembered what she used to whisper when no one was around. If you're ever truly in danger, call out to Jesus. The memory hit me like a wave. Why would I remember that now? Why would her words, so forbidden, so dangerous, rise up from the deep like a warning bell? I tried to shake it off, but it stuck. I paced the room, haunted by it. Call to Jesus? That would be blasphemy. That would be treason. But something in me cracked open, like a dam I had held shut my entire life. The fear of losing Miriam was stronger than the fear of punishment, and something inside me, something beyond logic, believed those words, that maybe this wasn't just a family crisis. Maybe this was part of something bigger. That night, I barely slept. I watched the news obsessively, searching for footage from Texas. Nothing. Just scrolling. Death tolls and rising waters. I called and called again. No answer. Then, at 3:17 a.m., I collapsed on my bed and whispered it. Not with confidence, not with any real knowledge, just desperation. Jesus, if you're real, please, save her. That was all. Just one sentence. It was like a door opened inside me, and for the first time in my life, I felt heard. Not watched, not judged, heard, like someone was listening who didn't need me to perform, who already knew my fear, my brokenness, and didn't flinch. And then the room felt different. The air thickened. It was like something had entered the silence. I didn't see anything, but I felt presence. It wasn't fear exactly, but a reverent kind of terror, like something holy had passed through. My heart pounded, not in panic, but in awe. I knew, deep in my bones, I had just broken into a realm they never told us about. I had touched the edge of a revelation, and I couldn't unfeel it. Whatever was happening wasn't just about Miriam. It was about me, about the war behind the curtain. The war no one in my world dared to admit was real. I didn't realize it then, but that simple prayer would trigger events that would shatter my reality. Jesus didn't just hear me, he responded. And what came next would challenge every truth I thought I knew, because the rescue that followed wasn't natural. It wasn't luck, it was supernatural, and it marked the beginning of my awakening. I waited days for news. Each minute stretched like a lifetime. I kept checking my phone, refreshing every feed, trying not to let panic eat me alive. I felt like I had stepped outside of time, caught between the old world I'd always known and something vast and unseen that was now reaching for me. And then, 3 days later, my phone rang. It was Miriam, alive, safe, breathing. I nearly dropped the phone. She was crying, but not from fear. She was shaking with something close to wonder. "Soraya," she said, "something happened. I don't even know how to explain it." As she spoke, I sat frozen. She told me that the floodwaters had risen to their windows, and they were moments from being swallowed alive. Her girls were screaming. She was ready to say goodbye, until, out of nowhere, a man in white appeared outside their window. He had no boat, no car. He just walked through the water like it wasn't even there. He reached his hand through the broken glass and told her to follow. She hesitated. Who wouldn't? But when he spoke again, she said, every fear left her body. She grabbed her daughters and climbed out. He led them through the flood to higher ground. And then he vanished. Her words stabbed through me. A man in white, walking on floodwaters. It was like a story straight out of one of those Christian testimonies I had secretly watched online late at night, hidden under covers, headphones buried deep. I remembered people describing encounters just like this during their near-death experiences. Ordinary people. Soldiers, truckers, even children, facing death and rescued by someone they all described the same way. Full of light, full of peace, calling them mine. Every hair on my body stood up. This wasn't coincidence. I knew who had come for her. I ended the call and collapsed onto the prayer rug. Not to perform, not to recite, just to breathe. Something in me had shifted. Permanently. I was terrified, but not the usual kind of fear. This was different. It was the kind of fear you feel when you realize the ground beneath you was never solid to begin with. Like everything I had ever been taught might have been part of a deception. That this man we were told to respect, but never follow, wasn't just another prophet. He was the truth. And he had just answered me. That night I prayed again, not to Allah, not the ritualistic phrases I had said 1,000 times, but to Jesus, quietly, secretly, like a child whispering to a friend in the dark. I don't know who you are, but you saved my sister. You heard me, and I want to know more. As soon as I said it, I felt it again. That deep, warm current of something not from this world, not harsh, not demanding, just presence, love, power. It wasn't emotionalism. It was like the veil had been lifted for a second, and I could see past the layers of control, tradition, and fear I had been trained to obey. I didn't know what to do with it yet, but I knew I could never go back. From that moment forward, I began to live in two worlds. By day, I was Princess Soraya, the perfect, polished daughter of royalty. But by night, I was a seeker. And the one I was seeking wasn't found in mosques or politics. He was found in whispers, in dreams, in the secret moments when the world went silent. And those moments, they were just beginning. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The man in white, the floodwaters, the timing. It didn't feel like chance. It felt orchestrated, designed. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something deeper was at play. Miriam hadn't just been rescued from drowning, she had been chosen to witness something that tore the mask off reality and revealed what was behind it. A spiritual war raging right in front of us, hidden behind politics, disasters, and global news cycles. This wasn't just about my sister, it was about what I was beginning to see, and what I couldn't unsee anymore. She later told me that when the man reached out to her, he didn't scream. He didn't panic. He just looked her in the eyes and said, "I'm here. Come." And when she hesitated, he smiled and added, "I've been with you since before the storm." That shook me. It sounded eerily similar to a verse I'd come across in a YouTube video I had watched in secret months earlier, from a former Muslim who had seen Jesus in a dream during a near-death experience. That man had said the same thing. "I've always been with you." What were the odds? Unless they weren't odds. Unless this was the truth. I started digging deeper. Every night, after my palace responsibilities were done, I locked myself in my room and consumed hours of testimonies, people from all over the world describing the same phenomenon. Christian truckers in Kansas, a former Taliban fighter in Afghanistan, a tech CEO from New York. All of them saw the same man in white during their darkest hour. Some were drowning, some were bleeding out on battlefields, some were simply about to end their lives. And every time Jesus showed up, not to condemn, but to rescue, to awaken. And every time their lives turned upside down afterward, mine included. I remember one night in particular, I watched a testimony from a former intelligence officer who claimed he had access to files that confirmed high-level officials across several nations had researched these appearances of the man in white. He said governments knew something supernatural was happening, but they kept it hidden. Why? Because if people knew the truth, they'd stop. Trusting the systems. The elite that controlled media, religion, and even modern medicine thrived on fear and ignorance. But Jesus? He didn't use fear. He used love, presence, power. He was the direct opposite of their system, and that made him dangerous. To them. That's when it really hit me. This wasn't just a miracle, it was a revelation, a glimpse behind the curtain. And I had seen enough to know that my life was no longer mine. I had stepped into something much bigger, a current pulling me toward awakening, toward purpose, toward Jesus. And while my external life hadn't changed, my spirit had. I knew I had to keep following the trail, no matter the cost. Because once you taste the truth, no amount of luxury, tradition, or fear can satisfy you again. Something inside me had been lit, and there was no putting the fire out. The rescue had marked me, but not just as a witness, as someone being called. I felt it every time I closed my eyes. A quiet but persistent pull in my chest, like a whisper saying, "Come closer." And I knew exactly who it was. Jesus hadn't just saved my sister, he had reached into my soul and disturbed the order of everything I thought was sacred. And now I was living two lives. One the world could see, and one only heaven knew about. I started reading the Bible in secret. It terrified me. Not because of the words themselves, but because of what it meant to be caught. In my country, even owning a Bible could lead to exile, or worse. But still, I downloaded an app, deleted it after each session, re-downloaded it again the next night. I read the Gospel of John first. I cried the entire time, not because it was poetic, but because it felt like someone had finally turned on the lights. Every word felt like it was written for me, for the disillusioned, the broken, the obedient but empty daughter of a hidden empire. At night, I'd sneak to the rooftop of the palace and just stare at the stars. I'd pray, not in Arabic, not in ritual, but in whispers. Simple words, honest ones. And every time I said his name, Jesus, I felt that same warmth wash over me. Peace. But not the kind that numbs you, the kind that tells you there's a war going on, but that you're not alone in it. That's when I realized something terrifying and beautiful. We're in the middle of a spiritual war, and most of the world doesn't even know it. They're kept distracted, sedated by entertainment, fear, shame, and division. A hidden agenda designed by an elite that doesn't just want control, they want your soul. The more I prayed, the more I started seeing things differently. People, systems, rituals, even my own family. It was like I had put on spiritual lenses. And suddenly the palace didn't look like a blessing. It looked like a fortress, a prison made of gold. I began to see the faces of our staff, maids, guards, drivers, and I wondered how many of them had their own secret prayers, had their own longing for truth. I started being kinder, softer. Not out of duty, but because I finally saw them. through his eyes, with compassion, with love. My heart was changing, even as I kept it hidden. But make no mistake, I was terrified. Every day I lived with the dread that someone might check my phone, that a guard might overhear me praying, that a cousin might notice the change in my eyes. But despite the fear, I couldn't go back, because I had tasted truth, not as a philosophy, but as a person. And that taste was ruining me for anything else. I wasn't ready to come out yet, but in the secret corners of my soul, I knew. Jesus was awakening something eternal, and the more I leaned into him, the more he started to reveal just how deep the deception ran. I didn't recognize myself anymore, not in a bad way, but in a way that shook me to the core. I used to glide through palace halls like a statue carved from expectation, perfect posture, perfect words, perfect silence. But now, I was alive. Inside me, there was color, movement, and something I had never allowed myself to feel before: hope. And with that came a dangerous kind of clarity. Jesus hadn't just comforted me, he was transforming me from the inside out. And the change started to bleed into the parts of my life I had tried so hard to keep compartmentalized. I started seeing the palace staff differently. They weren't just background to my world. They were people, souls, fellow prisoners in a system designed to control and divide. I began remembering their names, asking about their families, smiling with sincerity. One of our cooks cried when I brought her a small gift and thanked her personally for a meal. She told me no one in the family had ever even spoken her name aloud. And in that moment, I realized something heartbreaking. We weren't just ruled by kings. We were part of a machine. And my silent rebellion, this secret awakening, was beginning to dismantle my role in it. But I had to be careful. Every kind gesture, every delay in a prayer, ritual, every missed gathering raised questions. I learned to blend in again, just enough to survive. But my heart no longer belonged to them. It belonged to him. Jesus was teaching me something radical: to love my enemies. To love even the ones who would destroy me if they knew. And so I did. Quietly, subversively. I started planting seeds, speaking truth in metaphor, asking deep questions at safe times. Nothing bold, nothing loud, but still revolutionary in a kingdom where truth is currency. Too dangerous to spend. The hardest part wasn't hiding. It was watching people I loved cling to the system that kept them bound. I saw women bowing not out of devotion, but fear. Men preaching rules without a trace of compassion. And worse, I began recognizing the signs of a deeper deception. I overheard conversations about media censorship, about foreign alliances being formed not through diplomacy, but through shared spiritual agendas. One night, I listened through the walls as two advisors discussed how religion could be leveraged in the digital era to create predictable obedience. My stomach turned. They weren't just managing a nation, they were managing souls. And yet, in the quiet of my room, Jesus kept whispering, "Stay with me." He wasn't asking me to run. Not yet. He was teaching me endurance, love in the face of danger, patience in the midst of a spiritual war. The transformation wasn't finished, but it was undeniable. I was no longer a daughter of royalty, trained for political appearances. I was becoming a daughter of the King of Kings, but this wasn't a fairy tale. This was war, and I knew. The deeper I walked into this new life, the higher the cost would become. The first time I heard him in a dream, I thought I was losing my mind. It wasn't words, exactly, at least not spoken in the way we know speech. It was like lightning moved through me, and somehow the silence said something. I was standing in a desert, completely alone. No palace, no guards, no veil, just me and him. He stood at a distance, glowing, but not with blinding light. It was the kind of light that invited you, held you, exposed you, and still didn't push you away. And then he said it. "You are mine." I woke up gasping for air, my body trembling. but my spirit, calm, peaceful, loved. I don't use that word lightly. Loved in my world meant political loyalty or cultural expectation. But this was different. Jesus had looked at the most hidden parts of me, parts no imam, no king, no man had ever touched, and he claimed me as his, not as property, not as a convert, as a daughter. And from that moment on, something changed in how I saw even my own fear. It was still there, but it no longer owned me. The dreams didn't stop. Sometimes they were vivid, sometimes subtle, always layered with messages I'd wake up trying to decipher. In one dream, I saw strings being pulled from the skies, dark, tangled strings connected to leaders across the globe. They moved like puppets, performing for cameras, preaching unity, pushing narratives. But behind the curtain, I saw beings, not human, cloaked in false light, whispering commands. And then Jesus appeared, and the entire scene trembled. He looked at me and said, "This is not what it seems. They deceive the nations." When I woke, my heart pounded with a sense of urgency I couldn't shake. That's when I began seeing the spiritual war for what it really was. Not just some symbolic inner battle, but a literal conflict happening right now across dimensions most people are trained not to see. It's in our politics, our education, our medicine, our entertainment, even in religion itself. A hidden agenda of fear, control, and deception, executed by an elite whose loyalty isn't to God, but to power. And yet, through it all, Jesus kept showing up, reminding me, "You're not crazy. You're not alone. You've seen behind the veil for a reason." Sometimes, in my loneliest moments, I'd sit on the marble floor of my prayer room and ask, why me? Why would Jesus reach into the center of Saudi royalty, into the depths of Islamic tradition, and call someone like me? The answer never came in words, but in presence. His presence, gentle, persistent, unshakable. It reminded me that this wasn't about me. It was about truth, about waking people up one heart at a time. And as terrifying as it was to live in hiding, I also knew this. I would rather walk through fire with him than sit in a palace without him. Because once you've encountered the divine, there's no going back. People think faith is loud, that it shouts from rooftops, fills churches, launches revolutions. But mine is quiet. It lives in whispers and shadows, in glances toward the sky when no one's looking, in the kind of prayers you only pray when you know they could cost you everything. My name is still Soraya Al-Rashid. I still dress the part. I still smile when I'm supposed to. But the truth is, I'm no longer who they think I am. Because deep within me, there's a fire no crown, no doctrine, no fear can put out. It's him. It's Jesus. And he is the reason I now live in tension every single day. Each morning I wake up and pretend. I slip into the costume of my old self. I rehearse the same lines. I nod at clerics and attend royal functions. And inside, I'm screaming for freedom. Not political freedom, spiritual freedom. Because I know the truth now. I've seen behind the curtain. I've touched the hem of eternity and survived. I carry a testimony that could shatter the glass walls of this kingdom. But I stay silent. Not because I lack courage, but because I've been instructed to wait. There's a timing to these things. And I've learned, through the quiet, how to listen. My faith has grown deeper in silence than it ever could in noise. I've learned to worship in thought, to pray without moving my lips, to hear God in the flicker of candlelight and the stillness of the night. And in that stillness, I see the war more clearly than ever. I see the elite tightening their grip on the world. I see the deception growing more sophisticated, disguised as progress, tolerance, even peace. But underneath it, there's a sickness, a desperation, because they know people are waking up, they know something's breaking through, and they can't control it. Jesus didn't ask me to start a rebellion. He asked me to love, to forgive, to stand firm in a place where truth is outlawed and Hearts are owned by fear, and so I do. I pray for my family. Yes, even the ones who would betray me if they knew. I pray for the women around me, still chained by religion disguised as righteousness. I pray for the nations, for the churches, for the leaders lost in political theater while souls slip away. And I pray for those like me, living double lives, awakened in secret, holding on to a quiet flame in the middle of a storm. One day, I may speak out. Maybe in this life, maybe in the next. But for now, this is where he has placed me. I am not free in the way the world defines freedom, but I am free in the only way that matters. Jesus saved my sister through a miracle, but he saved me through fire. And though no one around me knows it, I walk with him every day, every breath. And that, more than my title, my wealth, or my heritage, is who I am now. The palace may never see it. The world may never applaud it, but heaven knows. And that is enough. Now you know my story. But this wasn't just about me. It was about you. Because if Jesus could reach into the palace of a Saudi princess through walls of religion, tradition, and fear, then he can reach you too, wherever you are, however lost you feel. This isn't just one testimony. It's a call, a warning, a revelation. The world isn't what it seems. The news, the wars, the confusion, the division. It's not random. It's designed. There's a hidden agenda beneath it all, pulling strings behind closed doors. And while the elite fight to keep you blind, Jesus is still walking through storms, through fire, through lies, to rescue those who will listen. So, I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever felt like your soul was being prepared for something greater? Like maybe this isn't the first time your spirit has heard the truth? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your heart, your story, your questions. And if this video opened your eyes even a little, subscribe right now to Truth from Beyond and hit the notification bell. What's coming next is bigger than this video, bigger than me, because more are waking up, and the deception is running out of time. Watch the next video that's appearing on your screen now. It confirms everything I've lived, and it might be the final piece you've been searching for. I'm Soraya. Thank you for listening, and remember, the truth doesn't shout, it whispers, but it never stops knocking.